was in my honest intentions to have former Alabama wide receiver Ardarius Stewart join me to wrap up last week's edition of shows. Unfortunately, could not reach him, could not get in contact with him. So hopefully soon we can reconnect and have that segment. But the Crimson Tide did secure a victory on homecoming, defeating the Missouri Tigers 39-10 at Bryant-Denny Stadium. And with that being said, you are joined live with yours truly, Stephen Smith of Touchdown Alabama Magazine, for this week's edition of In My Own Words, the podcast. And before we jump into the first topic of the day, I want to remind you, if you have not downloaded the Touchdown Alabama Magazine app, you need to do so. If you want to be the envy of all your friends, and by that I mean, if you want to be the individual that has all the Tide at the palm of your hands when we talk about Nick Saban, constant updates on Tua Tagovailoa, constant updates in recruiting, constant updates on what's going on with the defense, the offensive line, the defensive line, special teams. You want all things Tide at the palm of your hands to be the plug for your friends. You have to get the Touchdown Alabama Magazine app. You can download that for your iPhone, iPad, iPod by going to the iPhone App Store. You can get that for your Android by going onto the Google Play Store. So, Touchdown Alabama Magazine app. Be the envy of all your friends. Have all things Tide at your fingertips. Get that app right there. But in playing the Missouri Tigers, Crimson Tide sustained a couple of injuries there. Had a few guys to get nicked and bruised up a bit, including a trio of talented players. Quarterback Tua Tagovailoa went down in the third quarter of the matchup, re-aggravating a knee injury that he sustained the week prior against Arkansas. It was a 3rd down and 5. I believe it was 3rd and 5 or 3rd and 6, and Tua is running through the left side of the offensive line. He slides down to protect himself, and upon watching the replay multiple times, it looked as though he had made it far than the line to gain. He picked up enough for the first down, but according to the officiating crew, he was less than the line to gain. And first and foremost, the officiating crew in this game was terrible. There were a number of dirty plays done on Missouri's end. I know Alabama defensive lineman Raekwon Davis had his little extracurricular thing where he gave a Missouri player a 1-2-3 piece meal to the face and then kneed him in the back of the helmet. Nick Saban will get on to him about that. But there were more so issues being done on Missouri's part, and there were calls on the field that were not made. Not the type of officiating that I expected to see, but that's what happened. But going back to Tua, after sliding, did not get up for a while there, and when he got up, he jogged off the field, went inside the medical tent, and Alabama fans holding their breath for dear life, because everybody took their eyes off the game and stared intently at the notorious medical tent as Tua and his family were inside. And it was like, is he going to come out? Is Tua going to come out? Darn this tent. Come out, Tua. Come out. Tua's going to be out of here in 3, 2, he's coming. Why isn't Tua coming out? What is going on in the tent? Is he okay? That was the main thing. Was he okay? And in my mind, I don't know if she did this or not, but just looking at how Tua's family, his mother Diane, his father Gaylou, very spiritually minded people, in my mind, I could just sense Miss Diane, with one of those old bottles of anointing oil that the grandmothers used to keep in their purses in church. She came out with one of those vintage bottles and like a New Testament Bible in her purse, and she's walking into the training tent. This probably did not happen, but I can just visualize this in my mind. She's walking into this training tent. She moves the trainers out of the way. She's like, guys, I got this. This is my son. I got this. And she pulls up to us pants leg. She rubs that knee with that anointing oil, and she's saying, "Not today, Satan, not today." And Tua goes flying out of that medical tent, fully ready to go. I mean, that's what's going on in my mind. But the Tagovailoa joined him in the medical tent. The training staff, the team doctors did what they had to do. Shortly after, Tua was out the tent, had his helmet on, ready to go. Could have went back into the game according to Coach Saban, but team had no need for him at that point. Game pretty much already well in hand. According to Saban, it was a re-aggravated injury to the sprained knee he had against Arkansas. According to a couple of people I talked to, it's actually a strained PCL muscle for Tua. It's a strained PCL. He's fine. We'll be able to play. I would honestly have Tua on a pitch count this week, which very well may happen. I'm going to tell you this right now, fans, that you will not be hyperventilating once the media puts out stories on Monday that Tua may not be at practice on Monday. There's a good chance he will rest Monday. There is a good chance he will take one day. The coaching staff will give him one day to rest and then work him back in the rest of the week, get him his reps so that he can play against Tennessee. And then once the game is in hand against Tennessee, pull him out, rest him the remainder of that game going into the bye week so they can have him healthy for LSU, because that's the main point. With the way LSU played against Georgia, the coach that nobody can understand, Ed Orgeron, putting the hammer down on Georgia and Kirby Smart, the way Joe Burrow played, managing the situation, LSU getting that win on November 3rd, the matchup between Tide and Tigers in Baton Rouge, looking very interesting right now. And you need Tua for LSU, you need Tua for Mississippi State, and you even need Tua for Auburn, despite the fact that this game, Auburn's imploding, fans want Gus Malzahn out, ticket prices for this game is dropping or are dropping, but still, it's the Iron Bowl. Everybody gets up for this game. This game means so much to so many people. You need Tua for that game as well. So, end all be all for Tua. Strained PCL muscles in his knee. He'll be fine. More than likely will rest on Monday. We'll practice the rest of the week. Put him on a pitch count against Tennessee. Once that matchup is in hand, pull him out, rest him, have him back for the important games down the stretch of the season. Henry Ruggs, sophomore wide receiver, had a twisted ankle in the game against Mizzou. He did finish. He's okay. The one questionable guy, DeVonta Smith, there was one play in the game where he pulled up, grabbing the back of his leg. It could be a calf. It could be a hamstring. Nick Saban coined it as a pulled muscle. I even heard some talk of it could be a groin situation. All those three are tricky things to deal with when you talk about calf, hamstring, groin. It's somewhere in that vicinity. Nick Saban did not specify. He just said a pulled muscle. DeVonta Smith will be day-to-day, is listed as day-to-day, is the most questionable guy. So the staff here at Touchdown Alabama Magazine, yours truly, will keep that thing monitored throughout practice this week. But he too should also be prepared to go to face Tennessee this week. So that's your injury report in terms of DeVonta Smith, Henry Ruggs, and Tua Tagovailoa. What we do each and every week, fans, following big games for the Crimson Tide, we like to give our MVPs, or I like to give my impact players, my MVPs from the previous game. This one will be more so defensive-oriented, seeing how defensive guys were challenged all week in practice. Those were the guys that were being pushed to step up, and the defense did its thing over the weekend. And number one, cornerback Savion Smith, he played big time against the Tigers. All last week, the thing was Trayvon Diggs is down, Diggs is hurt. He was finally playing well, finally stepping up, finally doing his thing, finally growing as a cornerback, as a shutdown guy, as a leader. He's out for the season. Can Savion Smith do it? I know I mentioned when he plays with great technique, he's outstanding. When he's lazy, he struggles. Was not lazy against the Tigers, stayed in perfect phase, cut guys off. He held Jonathan Johnson, who was Missouri's second leading receiver behind Emmanuel Hall, who did not play. Johnson just 1 catch for 9 yards. Savion Smith 4 total tackles, had 2 interceptions, picked off Drew Lock twice. Kept that ball out belt. Smith did an outstanding job. Nick Saban talked about how pleased he was with his performance, how he went out there, really set the tone for that defensive secondary, creating turnovers, making tackles, being at the right spot at the right time. And it's this type of performance that's going to help build his confidence moving forward against the likes of LSU, Mississippi State, Tennessee, and Auburn. Very proud of the former JUCO player and Florida native stepping up, fitting the bill in the absence of Trayvon Diggs. For my number 2 impact player, it seems as though Mack Wilson has finally settled into making the calls, being the guy at inside linebacker. The first 5 to 6 games, he looked out of sorts, looked confused at times, but against the Tigers, had his hard hat on, was ready to go, got the defense into perfect calls in run support, in pass defense, and affecting the quarterback. He made everything smooth on the field. Last week, he took ownership for the way the team played against Arkansas and made good on his promise that that would not happen again. Behind Mack Wilson, the Tides defense holding the Tigers to 212 yards offensively, 70 of those yards coming on the ground. 58 of those 70 yards came from the duo of Demarie Crockett and Larry Roundtree III, not doing much against Alabama's defense. So after the Crimson Tide giving up 100 yards to individual backs in Trey Regis in Louisiana, Rakeem Boykin for the Arkansas Razorbacks, it tightened up this week, allowing just 70 yards rushing to the Missouri Tigers, limiting Drew Lock to just a 50% completion clip, forcing 2 interceptions. Mack Wilson anchoring a front that sacked him, him being Drew Lock 4 times. Lock just did not have time in the pocket to make big-time throws in the field. And despite NFL scouts coming to see him play, they stayed to see this Alabama defense captained by Mack Wilson. Did a fantastic job. He paced the team with 11 tackles, did have 1 of the 4 sacks. Now, after the game, he talked about how he really took his film study seriously this week. He watched film after practice, he watched film after tutoring sessions, he watched film before both of those events. He wanted to make sure that he got his guys into the right run defense call, into the right pass defense call, into the right blitz call. He wanted to make sure if he was making the calls, they were going to be smooth, they were going to be on point, and the communication would be crisp. And Mack Wilson did that this week. A fine job by that young man, my number 2 MVP, as it looks that he is finally starting to understand and take on the role of being the inside linebacker, making the right calls, stepping up to the plate there. At number 3, where MVPs are concerned from my end, I'm going to go with the entire Alabama defensive line. I couldn't pick one guy. Had to go with the entire line because that entire line was lights out. Quinnen Williams continues to just be an absolute beast, and with each passing game, it seems like more and more there may be an NFL team that will put a first-round grade on him. I want him to come back selfishly, but there's going to be a team out there that's going to put a high grade on him based on how he's playing. Q, 7 tackles on the night against Missouri, 2 tackles for loss, 1 sack, 1 quarterback hurry, even forced a safety. His sack went for a safety, sacking Drew Lock in the end zone. Just completely drove the double team into the lap of Lock as he fell to the ground for the safety. Big play there by Quinnen Williams. Raekwon Davis, despite his extracurricular thing that happened, He had 6 tackles, 1 tackle for loss, and shared a sack. Isaiah Buggs just bugging out since the Texas A&M game. He's looking like the cornerstone of his defensive front. Buggs, 1.5 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks. He currently leads the team with 7.5 sacks, 8 tackles for loss. One of his sacks that forced a fumble of Drew Lock, the crowd was at a feverish pitch, and Buggs was just feeling the entire football game. You don't want to put a guy in front of that man. They're not going to be able to handle what Buggs is going to do coming off the line of scrimmage, a very high motor. Quentin Williams calling his teammate a freak of nature, and right now, Buggsy playing like a freak of nature. And not just those 3, Christian Miller at outside linebacker has been on one since the Ole Miss game against Missouri. 3 quarterback hurries. He also had a tackle for loss. Anthony Jennings, despite 1 tackle, he had a pass breakup and affected the quarterback as well. So the entire defensive front for the Crimson Tide stepped up, showed out, did its job by defensive line coach Craig Kulagowski, who challenged that group in practice with pass rush drills, with agility drills, because with him being a 15-year assistant at Missouri at one point in time, he knew what Drew Lock brought to the table. He knew what this run game brought to the table, and Craig Kulagowski wanted to shut up. His former employer did that. Alabama defensive front did its job. They are the 3rd MVP in my mind here. Number 4, we can finally flip to the offense where we pick up Jerry Jeudy, and the one thing we all have to learn from Jerry Jeudy this week, it doesn't matter who the quarterback is, the man gonna eat regardless. Whether it's Tua, whether it's Jalen Hurts, Judy's going to get his. Jeudy, 3 catches, 147 yards, including an 81-yard house call in the first quarter that opened the game. He has 9 touchdown receptions on the season, which ties him with former Alabama wide receiver Dennis Holman for 4th all-time. Holman picked up his 9 touchdowns in 1967. This was the 3rd conference game joining Ole Miss and Arkansas, in which Jeudy has put up 100 yards receiving. He's averaging 27.12 yards per catch, 100.7 yards per game, completely nasty. His 705 receiving yards on 26 catches, 6th in the NCAA, 1st in the Southeastern Conference. Jeudy, as I mentioned last week, is about to obliterate every record in the book that Amari Cooper held prior. Jeudy is no joke. So he is the 4th MVP and could very well win the Fred Biletnikoff Award. I'm also all for putting Jeudy in the Heisman race. If we're going to put Tua Tagovailoa in there, let's just put Jerry Jeudy in there as well. That way Alabama could have what Texas Tech had some years ago with Graham Harrell and Michael Crabtree, both going to New York for the Heisman. Alabama could also have what Oklahoma had, I think, last year or 2 years ago, when it had Baker Mayfield and D.D. Westbrook both in New York for the Heisman Trophy ceremony. So let's go ahead and get that hashtag Tua and Jeudy for Heisman. Go ahead and put that in there for the Crimson Tide. But Jerry Jeudy, 4th MVP. At number 5, how about the fans? How about the fans and the student section for number 5 MVP of this game? Nick Saban wanted a packed-out stadium. He got it from the moment Alabama stepped in to the final whistle. Yelling, screaming passionately, cheering, stomping of the feet. Missouri could not get in rhythm the entire night. Alabama's defense feasted off the crowd noise. Dixieland Delight came back. Dixieland done right. Now, there were a few F-bombs thrown in, but the smartness of athletic director Greg Byrne, they had crowd noise piped in that said, "Beat Auburn," which drowned out a lot of the F Auburn that was going on. So, and in talking with Greg Byrne on the sideline prior to the game ending, a lot of the media reporters asked him Is Dixie here to stay? Do we keep Dixie? And he kind of smiled, gave a nod, and said, yeah, Dixieland Delight done somewhat right thanks to the crowd noise being piped in from the speakers there. So fans stayed all 4 quarters. There were a few students that left, but the majority of everybody stayed all 4 quarters. Fan base, student section getting that 5th MVP there. So running back over, the most valuable players from my end, Savion Smith, cornerback, was number 1. Mac Wilson, inside linebacker, was number 2. The entire Alabama defensive line was number 3. Jeudy, wide receiver, number 4. And the Alabama fan base staying all 4 quarters, doing Dixieland Delight right for the most part, chiming in, rounded us out at number 5. Taking our first break here on In My Own Words. When we get back, we'll be joined live by the columnist of Touchdown Alabama, Clint Lamb. Clint Lamb was with me at the game over the weekend. He and I will dive in more so on what we saw from the game, what we took from Alabama, Missouri, and what can the Crimson Tide use from this matchup in helping them be even better against Tennessee, LSU, and in the games to come. Don't touch that dial, folks. We're just getting cranked up on In My Own Words. We'll be right back.